Alabama making their first trip to Gainesville since 2011. Florida hasn't beaten Bama since the '08 SEC championship game, and Tim Tebow was the quarterback of that team. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into Monkey Knife Fight. I'm Dan Watkins. Joining me this week from Rotowire.com is John McKechnie. John, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing great. We got the rust knocked off of us last week as far as our NFL picks, but we're a couple weeks into the college football season now. Got a little bit of sample to work with here, so we're going to try to put together a banner week here on this Thursday.
Yeah, it's a good slate this week. Week 3 here already. We're halfway through September. It's going pretty quick, and I feel like with the college football season this year, especially, I think we're already seeing those teams that are. I think we have a fairly good idea of who like the 6 or 7 teams are that are going to qualify and be in the discussion for the playoff. But anyway, I thought we'd switch to college football this week because as one of our dedicated viewers and probably Monkey Knife Fight players points out, I don't think we had a great week last week with the NFL. So I figured we'd give college football a shot.
That's a little bit more my forte. I will say I obviously love NFL too, but I mushed it last week. So this go around, I think college wise, I think we got a better chance of winning people some money here.
And let's jump right into it with the big gun in college football. This was everybody's Heisman. He was the Heisman favorite by far. The betting odds were extremely in his favor going into the season, but he hasn't started off so well. And I'm talking about Spencer Rattler from Oklahoma. They take on Nebraska at noon. It's that Fox big noon game that they try to make a big deal of every week. They had a good one last week with Ohio State, Oregon. So hopefully this one can live up to the hype. This is the first time that Nebraska and Oklahoma are playing each other since the 2010 Big 12 championship game. This used to be like the rivalry in all of college football. And now they hardly play anymore. You got Scott Frost, who's trying to make his program somewhat respectable on the Nebraska side. And then you got Lincoln Riley and Oklahoma, they're one of those teams that I mentioned that I think they're right in the running for a playoff spot if they can get it going here. So anyway, Spencer Rattler, let's jump right in with him. 325.5 more or less is his number this week. He hasn't hit that yet. Oklahoma as a team avoided a complete disaster against Tulane in week 1, barely winning. He finished with 304 passing yards in that one. And then last week was that joke of a game against Western Carolina, kind of a warm up for this week. The starters were pulled. He finished with 243. So how you feel about Spencer Rattler in a somewhat of a rivalry game here in Oklahoma?
Yeah, visions of Eric Crouch and Josh Heupel dancing through my head here as I think about this rivalry game. But yeah, we're going to see at least more than 30 minutes of Spencer Rattler in this one. So I think that portends to more than 30 pass attempts for Spencer Rattler in this one. And the way that his efficiency clip works, I think that he's someone that can average over 10 yards per pass attempt, especially going up against this Nebraska defense. They're going to be at home. Oklahoma is. You got guys like Mario Williams. You got Marvin Mims, Jaden Hazelwood, just like Austin Stogner, even the tight end. So many guys to work with here. So my initial concern about the 325 was just is Oklahoma going to get up by enough to where they lay off the passing, and we just see a very efficient day from Rattler, but not one that leads to that volume. So 325 is a big number for him to hit. It's not a number that he hit with any sort of regularity a year ago. I think he only hit that twice last year, so that's a bit of a concern. But I think if we want to take it to narrative street, we want to see Oklahoma restart the Rattler for Heisman. They're going to let him rip Nebraska to shreds. And with that in mind, I think 325 is definitely in play. So give me the more on Spencer Rattler.
I like the more as well. As you mentioned, loaded receiving core, and it starts with Marvin Mims. I think he's going to have a big day as well. The over-under in this game is 61, so the odds makers themselves are expecting a lot of points here in this game, and I think Spencer Rattler is a great way to start with that one. And then on the other side, you got Adrian Martinez. He does it all. He pretty much is the Nebraska offense. He's second, I think, in the country for quarterback rushing yards. He's gone over 100 rushing in 2 of the 3 games so far. Nebraska's played 3 games already. They had that weird college football decided to do that weird thing in the last weekend of August. We're like, yeah, hey, here's a little taste with an important Big Ten matchup with Nebraska, Illinois. But But we're not going to give you a full slate, just a little taste, a little teaser there a couple weeks ago. But Adrian Martinez, his number 235.5 is that more or less number for him. How are you feeling about Adrian Martinez?
I think that this game flow sets up well for the more. I think that, we saw him throw over 30 pass attempts in that season opener against Illinois. He was brutal in that game. And didn't quite get that 235 number, but has hit that in back-to-back weeks on much fewer pass attempts, much more efficient. Like you said, he does do it all, the good and the bad, turns the ball over a ton, the fumbles. Daniel Jones even thinks that he has a problem with that. You look at yeah.
Wow.
I went there. The interceptions, it can be pretty brutal. He seems to time them up at a point where Nebraska can least afford them. But either way,
good this year so far, though. He's been very, very good this year so far, taking care of the ball.
He's got some receivers that can actually make things work. Torre seems to be an interesting guy that they have. So I just think that we're going to see Martinez drop back north of 30, 35 times, and 235 is a pretty low number. Oklahoma, they had Pratt move the ball on them from Tulane a few weeks back. I think it's just such a tantalizingly low number that I got to go with the more on Martinez there as well.
Does the Oklahoma pass rush scare you at all? Martinez, just when I was doing my research last night, getting ready for this, I saw he's the fourth highest pressured quarterback in the Power Five. In the Power Five, he's pressured almost 50% of the time. So that leads to that's why I'm kind of I think he's going to be running more than he's going to be passing in this game.
No, that's a totally fair concern. But especially by Oklahoma standards, that they have a very good pass rush. So we could see Martinez under duress a lot. A lot of those dropbacks turn into rushes for him. So that's absolutely a concern. I just still think that at the end of the day, 235 is a low enough number in a game where Martinez is going to be dropping back north of 35 times to where I'll go with it.
All right. I want to flip this back to Spencer Rattler for a minute. As we talked about at the beginning, he was like the odds-on favorite to be the Heisman Trophy winner this season. How do you feel about his Heisman chances right now, a couple weeks in? You think this is a make or break game for him? This is the first time against a real opponent for Oklahoma, and he's got to perform?
I think it's a spot where he can't have a letdown. Like, I think most people expect him to have some success against this Nebraska team. I don't think Nebraska, and rightfully so, has a ton of respect nationally right now, given how things have gone under Scott Frost. So this is something where Rattler just needs to check the box. I still think that this is probably going to end up being Bryce Young's award to lose as far as the Heisman is concerned. He comes out, blows the doors off of Miami in week one and seizes control of being the odds-on favorite. So I like Bryce Young's chances right now, and he's got a huge opportunity that we'll get to against Florida in the Swamp. But I think Rattler, he can't screw around. He can't struggle with this Nebraska team. But I don't think a game against Nebraska will be the one that we circle on his Heisman highlights in New York.
All right, fair enough. And I'm glad you brought up Bryce Young. Let's go right to the big game, at least for probably the first half, at least. All eyes are going to be on this one. We'll see what happens. Just the way Alabama's been playing. But Alabama making their first trip to Gainesville since 2011. Florida hasn't beaten Bama since the 2008 SEC championship game, and Tim Tebow was the quarterback of that team. Bryce Young and the Crimson Tide, they're 13.5-point favorites. So, every week it's just like, can anybody even beat Bama, really? And it starts and ends with Bryce Young. 285.5 is his more or less numbers. He's hit that in one of the two games. He hit that against Miami in week one. He finished with 344 yards. And then last week against Mercer, I think he was out by like the beginning of the third quarter, and he still finished with 227. So he was fairly close for a blowout game. But how do you feel about Bryce Young?
I like Bryce Young in this setup. I think anything under 300, you have to consider it. I think that the fact that you have Alabama going on the road, this game is expected to be certainly the most competitive game of Bama's regular season to this point, and it might end up being the most competitive game of the regular season, period, depending on how that A&M game shakes out. But I think that is going to lead to Bama needing Bryce Young to do things. And if they do, then he's going to do them. So I think we're going to see Bryce Young push into the amount of pass attempts to where that 285 is on the table. And I don't think that Florida's defense is all that talented. In the secondary, Kyrie Elam is a good player, of course, but I think that the Crimson Tide, just the sheer amount of weapons that they have on offense. It starts with McKechnie, but we haven't even seen those freshman receivers really even break out yet, or Jamison Williams, the Ohio State transfer. So Young can go anywhere with it and have some success. And I think the fact that he's going to be playing 4 quarters, that all of that really helps kind of strengthen the case for him going over 285. It's the other one that I'm really struggling with as far as the more or less.
Do you have any concern for Bryce Young in the Swamp this weekend? I mean, this is the first hostile crowd he's faced. I think it's going to be raining too Saturday in Gainesville. So any concerns there with the weather or the environment?
He seems like he's totally built different. He's been kind of a legendary kid since he was at Mater Dei, and people were kind of like ready for JT Daniels to reclassify so it could be the Bryce Young show at Mater Dei. Like, he's just such a huge deal. I don't think that really anything phases him. He's been at Bama for a year. He knows what these big environments look like, even if he hasn't been the guy under center for him. So I just think he's wired completely differently. And I don't think that he's going to be too rattled by the Swamp, even though that is, obviously one of the toughest places to play in all of college football.
And then on the other side, I don't know what it is with the Florida schools, and the Monkey Knife Fight shows that they just don't like to name the quarterback, or we don't even know who it is. But this happened when we did a week 1 show. Florida State didn't know who their quarterback was going to be.
Oh, yeah.
And now week 3, we're doing a full show, and the Florida Gators, they say Emory Jones is the starter, but Dan Mullen this week saying that his quarterbacks know the plan. He's got Anthony Richardson is expected to play as well in this one. So Emory Jones's number, as you kind of hinted at before, is very low. It's 130.5. He finished with 151 last week. Richardson came in and played quite a bit in that one, and he only finished with 113 against FAU in week 1. Me personally, anytime there's a 2 quarterback thing going on, I'm taking the less. How do you feel about Emory Jones?
I think that's right, and the fact that he has this amount of passing yards, like less than 300 passing yards through 2 games against USF and FAU on almost 50 pass attempts. Man, he's not going to be having nearly that amount of success against this Alabama defense. And I just think that Anthony Richardson clearly gives, if Florida's going to make this game interesting, it's because of Anthony Richardson. It's not because of Emory Jones. I don't think that we're going to see Emory Jones get to throw or have the luxury of throwing it 20 plus times in this one, because I think that the results on attempts 1 through 15 are going to be concerning enough to where Mullen just has to go with the guy who gives them a better chance. And it's Richardson. Richardson is just chaos, like, out there. He 50 yards per pass attempt last week on 3 passes, of course, but still it's like, oh my God. And then, 28 yards per rushing attempt too. I know he had a bit of a hamstring in that game. That's the only thing that makes the more in play here slightly for Emory Jones. But if Richardson suits up, he's the answer. He's the only way that Florida State stays competitive on offense. So with that in mind, I don't think that Emory Jones is going to hit that 130.5.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit of gamesmanship too from Mullen this week. I mean, he's saying, we're expected to play both quarterbacks, but Nick I don't know really how much mind games you can do in a regular season game with Nick Saban.
No, he sees right through him.
More. Yeah. But anyways, back to, Nick Saban, he's come out and talked this week about the 2 quarterbacks, and he pretty much started off talking about their running ability. And I think that leads you to think too, that these guys, I don't have much faith in Emory Jones going over 130.5 or whatever that number is. I think it's going to be pretty low. And then last up, we got a big game on Saturday night, Auburn at Penn State in Happy Valley. I do a little news work on the side too. And part of my duties is to kind of oversee what's going on in the Northeast. And one story that caught my eye as I was doing that was that the airport near Happy Valley, near Penn State, is like bracing for record numbers. So that's just how big this game is this weekend on Saturday Night Football on ABC, with Auburn heading up to Happy Valley to play Penn State, number 22 versus number 10. Both these numbers for both these quarterbacks are rather low. I think that tells you that these are 2 running teams, 2 tough-nosed teams, and 2 great defensive teams. But let's start off with Sean Clifford. 214.5 is his more or less number. I feel like he's hit that in both games. 247 against Wisconsin, which that game was just an absolute snooze fest for the first half. Unless you like Big Ten football, which I know our producer Jay does. He loves Big Ten football. 247 in that first game, 230 in that second game last week against Ball State. How do you feel about Sean Clifford here? He's cut down on the turnovers from last year, but I'm still thinking that this is going to be a big Noah Cain game for the Nittany Lions.
I mean, both of these numbers seem pretty low to me. I think that, in this particular instance, Auburn facing its first real competition of the season, Penn State really got that off their chest in week one, having to go into Madison and beat the Badgers the way that they did. But I think Clifford, 214, I think he's going to have enough dropbacks. You've got guys like Jahan Dotson and Parker Washington there in the receiving core. I think that Dotson's someone that can go over 100 yards, so that just already gets you basically halfway there to this number. And I think the combination of Parker Washington and the other guys that Penn State has, it will be enough for him to hit that 214 and a half. I think that Penn State, what if they end up trailing a little bit? They're going to need to throw it a little bit more than maybe they would feel comfortable with generally. So I think that all of that kind of points towards the more when it comes to Clifford this weekend against Auburn.
Do you have any concerns with Penn State? James Franklin's already addressed his team about USC rumors that are already circling and flying there. I mean, you have a lot of the top college football insiders saying that he's one of the top candidates to take the job in Southern California. Any concern there that Penn State might just not be with it this weekend?
I think when it comes down to it, and the fact that this is going to be I think that is a distraction for them overall, but when it's Happy Valley, when it's the first whiteout that they've had in 2 years, when you get a chance to beat an SEC team like Auburn, I think that goes away for at least a few hours. So I think that Penn State will be ready to roll in this one. I think that if it is a distraction, if they do let it become a distraction in any sort of way, I still don't think that it manifests itself this week on Saturday.
And then on the other side, you got Bo Nix, third-year starter for the Auburn Tigers. He's been very good so far this year after a so-so, not great sophomore campaign. But then again, his two teams that they've played so far, Akron and Alabama State are the two teams. Yeah, those are the two.
Correct.
So 200.5 is his more or less number. He hit that with ease that first game, 20 of 22 passing in that 60-10 win. And then Auburn, they routed Alabama State last week, but he only completed about 50% of his passes in that one, finished with just 108 yards. Bo Nix struggled a lot on the road, just a 54% completion percentage on the road in his career. And this is going into a very hostile environment. As you mentioned, the first whiteout game in 2 years for Penn State. How do you feel about Bo Nix?
Yeah, those road splits are definitely concerning. I mean, the numbers seem to fall off a cliff for him when he's away from the plains. So that definitely puts the less in play more so than you would normally think for a guy of Nix's talent and Nix's experience. But 200.5 is just so low. I think it's going to be such a competitive game that Nix is going to need to be dropping back, throwing the ball. I think that the receiving core there is very inexperienced, but it's still one that has some talent to it. The Georgia transfer, Demetrius Robinson, Shedrick Jackson, a handful of other guys there, I think can be playmakers against this Penn State team. So it's going to be close. It's going to be really, really close, but it only takes 201 yards to do it. And in modern college football, I think that it's more likely that happens than not. So I will take the more when it comes to Bo Nix. So Bo, you got to show me something on the road here, bud.
Yeah, I like the more here too. And I'm just hoping after last week's Saturday night game, which was Washington and Michigan, which was some of the worst quarterback play I've ever seen in my entire life.
Horrible.
I'm just hoping that this one is much better. And then
if I may, because you mentioned in the beginning, Dan, John, that State College is preparing for the influx of fans. When Penn State has a whiteout game, it is actually just State College in general. It's the 13th most populated city in Pennsylvania. There's a bunch of them in between Reading, Erie, Allentown, stuff like that. Obviously, Philadelphia and Pittsburgh being 1 and 2. When there's a whiteout game at Penn State, State College becomes the third most populated city in the state.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I mean, they're going to fill it like it's the largest capacity in college football, right? With like 110,000 in that stadium.
And they also find like 18,000 other spots for people.
Yeah.
Like it's like on the grounds somewhere.
Standing room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be a good time Saturday night in Happy Valley for sure. And then any other plays, John, that caught your eye here as you went across the Monkey Knife Fight board?
Yes. So looking at the Miami game, they're going up against Michigan State. I've been fading Miami a fair amount this year and to reasonable success. I mean, it took a late game heroics for them to beat App State, and they certainly didn't cover that one. And obviously got their doors blown off in week one. I just don't think De'Aaron King has it. I think he's gotten precipitously worse over the course of his college career. He was awesome in 2018 at Houston. 19, he plays 4 games and then, jumps ship from Houston under Dana Holgerson. Was fine last year. Now coming off the ACL in the bowl game. I think this Michigan State team, and I tend to be one of the more vocal like Michigan State doubters and haters almost, but I think that they're going to slow him down. So I'll take the less on De'Aaron King throwing for 215 and a half yards.
You like the little brother defense this weekend, taking on Miami. I got one for you, just because I love saying his name, DJ Uiagalelei for Clemson. His more or less number is 190.5. That has dropped dramatically from 2 weeks ago. He struggled so far. I mean, he's finished with 178 against Georgia and then 171 last week. But I think this is the game that he's going to right the ship and get things going. And I think you got to say that about the entire Clemson team here. They're number 6. They're 1-1. The rest of their schedule is a complete joke. And I think that they no ranked opponents as of now the rest of the way. And I don't think any of those teams really have a chance to become ranked as the season goes on. They got to put up some style points here, man, if they want to get into the college football playoff. And that starts and ends with DJU. I think he's going to have a big day against that Georgia Tech defense.
Yeah, I think that's a great job hunting down that number. I think that, like you're mentioning, Clemson needs to start impressing people. Obviously, they didn't really have a chance to do that one way or the other last week, so they probably still have a bad taste in their mouth from week one. Who better to do it against than Georgia Tech, who really just, it looks like, despite their change away from the triple option, this is year 3 for them, or for Jeff Collins and them here in Atlanta, and it's still not really taking root. So I think Clemson definitely takes advantage of that one. And then I had one more, if I could toss it out, staying in the ACC with this North Carolina Virginia game. I like Brennan Armstrong. I think that Virginia throws the ball a ton, and Armstrong, even though he doesn't have like a who's who of receivers, he's crushed that over 270 mark through the first 2 games of the season. I think that he can do it again. I think if UNC is putting that type of pressure on Virginia offensively to keep pace, then it's going to be on Armstrong and his arm to get that done. So 270 and a half, I think, is definitely in play for for Brennan Armstrong.
Great. Awesome. I love it. All right. I think that's going to do it for us this week on our college football show. So have fun watching, guys. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on the Monkey Knife Fight YouTube channel. John, where can they follow you on Twitter?
You can find me on Twitter at Johns_tailgate. And you can find my other stuff on Rotowire.com and the college football section and the sports betting section.
Great. And you can find me at Dan Watkins Radio on Twitter as well.